Surely you've heard of Genoa. It was once a powerhouse in the Mediterranean, a mighty maritime republic that dominated trade, banking, and naval warfare from the Middle Ages all through the Renaissance. It was known for its fierce rivalry with Venice. Genoa controlled key trade routes, founded colonies across the Mediterranean, and even played quite a pivotal role in the Crusades. We'll get to that later. Of course, its fleet was legendary. Its wealth helped fund explorers like Christopher Columbus. It gives us a rich legacy of art, culture, and political influence. Genoa's rise and fall offer a fascinating story of ambition, power, and the ever-changing tides of history. But we're not going to start from the Middle Ages today. We're going to go back a little bit earlier, and we're not quite going to end at the Renaissance. We're going to go a little bit later than that. But first, let me welcome you to the channel. Where are my manners? Welcome to the channel. If it's your first time here, good to meet you. For those returning, great to have you back with me. Today we're talking about Genoa. We already spoke about Venice a little while back, and I figured that I was due for a video about Genoa. So here I am. Those who enjoy the content may like, subscribe, and leave a comment, or just continue enjoying it in whatever capacity they want to do so. But get relaxed, because we begin now. And we begin all the way back in the 5th or 4th millennium. That's right. People have been living in the region that is now the city since that time. And this makes it quite an old one, continuously inhabited. It is believed that the first town, which is also referred to as an oppidum, was originally established in the 5th century BC at the peak of a hill that is now known as Castello. This is, of course, the word for castle, which is situated within the medieval Old Town. Now, it is highly probable that the ancient Ligures were the ones who established this town. It was the ancient Ligures who were responsible for giving the name to the modern region of Liguria. Bit of trivia there for you, already off to a good start. During this time period, the Genoese town, which was inhabited by the Genuati, a group of Ligure peoples, was regarded as the emporium of the Ligurians, due to the fact that it had a strong commercial character. Of course, we are going back to very old Roman depictions of this region. The Genoese oppidum formed an alliance with Rome during the Second Punic War by means of a foedus aquum, which is Latin for equal pact. The Second Punic War, by the way, Punic referring to Carthage, Rome's old rival, at least before all the other rivals came up. Now, this alliance was maintained throughout the conflict, fairly unshakable. Between the years of 209 and 208 BC, the Carthaginians were the ones who were responsible for its destruction. Reconstruction of the town took place, and in 146 BC, right after the conclusion of the Punic Wars, the town was granted rights of a municipal government. Following that, the original castrum expanded into the regions that are now denoted by the names Santa Maria de Castello and San Lorenzo Promontory. One of the goods that was traded at this time was actually honey, and other items included skins and timber. Interesting thing about honey is that it's one of the few foods that do not spoil. In fact, it might be the only one that doesn't spoil, come to think of it. Well, of course, this encompassed the transportation of goods to and from the hinterland of Genoa, which included major cities such as Tortona and Piacenza, among a few others. It was discovered that the location of the site was also the location of an amphitheater, in addition to other archaeological remains from the Roman period as well. Of course, following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, a period of turmoil ensued. Why? Well, various Germanic tribes began to invade and settle across much of what had once been Roman territory. Now, with posts abandoned and weapons sheathed, it was basically up for grabs. It's free real estate. Among these invaders, the Lombards, a Germanic tribe, played quite a role in shaping the future of the region. You see, in 643, the Lombard kingdom under the leadership of King Rothari took control of Genoa, along with other cities along the Ligurian coast. This marked the beginning of a long period of Lombard influence in the area. In 773, the political landscape of Genoa shifted once again when the Frankish Empire annexed the Lombard kingdom. The Frankish Empire, by the way, later on to be the Carolingians, that is the one of Charlemagne, those great kings of those sorts, the French, before they were called the French, essentially. Now at this time, the first Carolingian Count of Genoa, Ademaris, was appointed to govern the city and its surroundings. He was granted the title of Praefectus Civitatis Genuensis, which reflected, of course, his authority over the town, although at this point it's important to say that Genoa was still a relatively small settlement, and being a relatively small settlement, that carries limitations to one's political or commercial influence. But don't worry, they'll grow into the role. It would take several more centuries, actually, for Genoa to begin developing its own identity as this major trading hub, not at least to say a major naval power. During the next 100 years, the city focused on building its merchant fleet, a critical component of its future success. Over time, the fleet would grow to dominate trade in the western Mediterranean, eventually making Genoa one of the most influential maritime powers in the region, and one of the most influential in history. Believe me, it's up there with the Spanish Armada. It's up there with the British Navy. Don't believe me? Keep on listening. However, Genoa's growth was not without significant growing pains. In 934 to 935, the city suffered a devastating blow when a Fatimid fleet, led by Yaqub ibn Ishaq al-Tamimi, attacked and completely ravaged the city. They were looted, and much of what was left in its wake was set fire to. A trail of destruction. The new foundation of the city, the rubble of the old. This attack, however, has been the subject of historical debate, with some scholars questioning whether Genoa at that time was nothing more than a small, insignificant fishing village, hardly worth the effort of a military campaign, while others argue, including myself, that the city must have been a growing commercial center to have attracted such an assault in the first place. Now, why would Mr. al-Tamimi even stop at a fishing village? Unless he was really craving fish. Perhaps. But it seems pretty unlikely to me. Either way, the events surrounding this attack remain quite a source of intrigue. And it's just the nature of the early history when we don't have too much written records explicitly referring to this time in Genoa, at least not from the Genoans themselves. But don't worry, despite the setback, Genoa continued its gradual rise in importance. A significant turning point occurred many years later, in 958. We're talking about 20 years after the attack, when local political structure gained a major boost. Well, what happened? Well, you see, a diploma from Berengar II of Italy granted Genoa full legal autonomy, ensuring that the city's lands would be regarded as landed lordships. This recognition paved the way for further developments in Genoa's governance. By the late 11th century, the lords of nearby valleys and coastal areas, as well as various trade associations, gathered together to create the city's first formal constitution. This development marked the establishment of Genoa as a, well, as they say in the tongue, compagnia communis, a self-governing city-state. So we arrive now to the point where Genoa becomes Genoa. The early history is out of the way. Perhaps the hard days are not quite over. But now we've really got a foundation of a city. We've got something. Genoa has become what it needs to be. Of course, over the coming centuries, the political structure played a significant role in shaping Genoa's future. The city's local organization maintained its relevance and influence through the Middle Ages, with its Grand Council categorizing members according to their political allegiances and affiliations with different compagnie. Now this word compagnie, of course, is referring to trade associations, by the way. As late as 1382, the classification continued to be a defining feature of Genoa's political landscape. It's complex and often factionalized, this nature of its governance. You'll see what I mean. So by the year 1100, Genoa had become an independent city-state, all of its own, joining the ranks of other powerful Italian city-states, for example, Venice, Pisa, these kinds of places. Although the Bishop of Genoa held the nominal role of president, and the Holy Roman Emperor remained the city's formal overlord, real power rested in the hands of elected consuls. These consuls were chosen annually by popular assembly, showing once again the growing autonomy of Genoa as a political entity, deciding their own fate. During this period, the city faced external threats too, particularly from Muslim raiders who had begun targeting coastal cities across the Mediterranean. In the year 1000, Pisa was actually attacked by Muslim forces, and by 1015 these raids intensified, with Luni also coming under assault. The situation escalated in 1016, when Mujahid al-Siglabi, the emir of the Taifa of Denia, launched a massive attack on Sardinia. We're talking a fleet of over 125 ships. That's a lot. Genoa, alongside Pisa, joined forces to defend the island, marking the beginning of a series of military alliances between the two cities. However, by 1066, competition for control of Sardinia led to open conflict between Genoa and Pisa. The two city-states went to war over the island's strategic and economic importance. Alongside other influential Italian city-states like Venice, Amalfi, Gaeta, Ancona, and Ragusa, Genoa was recognized as one of the maritime republics. These cities held significant naval power during the medieval period, and their fleets were critical in shaping the political and commercial landscape of the Mediterranean. Now, one of Genoa's most notable military endeavors actually took place in 1087, when they, alongside Pisa, launched a joint naval assault on the Fatimid Caliphate's capital, Mahdia, in North Africa. This operation was led by Hugh of Pisa, with additional support from soldiers from the Pantaleone of Amalfi, as well as contingents from Salerno and Gaeta. The attack, which came to be known as the Mahdia Campaign, was officially sanctioned by Pope Victor III, who provided religious backing. After a fierce battle, the attackers managed to take control of Mahdia. However, the victory was a little bit short-lived, as Arab forces led by the Fatimids were able to rally and drive the invaders out. Bad luck, I suppose. The Genoese and Pisan fleets withdrew after a dramatic naval clash, which resulted in the destruction of the Arab fleet in the harbour. Despite the withdrawal, the campaign marked a pivotal moment in the struggle for the dominance in the western Mediterranean, and it solidified the influence of Genoa, Venice, and Pisa. Which you don't think about Pisa too much, don't you? But give them a little bit of credit. The collapse of the Arab fleet significantly altered the balance of power, must be said, allowing Western European states to more easily ship supplies and reinforcements to the Crusades during the First Crusade, 1096 to 99. Now, a little bit before that, 1092, Genoa's military efforts expanded further when it joined forces with Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile to launch a campaign against the Muslim Taifa of Valencia. This alliance, which also included troops from the Kingdom of Aragon under King Sancho Ramirez, culminated in a failed siege of Tortosa, which proved to be an unsuccessful military operation. Despite the setback, however, these campaigns certainly got the attention of the other side, and it solidified Genoa's role in this broader struggle of the era. Now, the First Crusade. That was the catalyst for Genoa's real growth into a powerful force. In 1097, to aid the Crusader effort, Hugh of Châteauneuf, the Bishop of Grenoble, and William, Bishop of Orange, arrived in Genoa to deliver sermons and rally support for the Holy War. The Genoese response was swift. They provided a ship, 12 galleys, and a contingent of 1,200 soldiers to join the Crusaders. Under the leadership of local aristocrats de Insula and Avvocato, the Genoese fleet sailed towards the eastern Mediterranean. During the siege of Antioch in 1098, the Genoese played a crucial logistical role by blockading the city from the sea and providing naval support for the Crusaders besieging it on land. Genoese crossbowmen, commanded by Guglielmo Embracco, also provided critical assistance during the siege of Jerusalem in 1099, reinforcing Crusader forces with these fancy sharpshooting abilities. Crossbows were pretty good at the time. Now, the Genoese also formed a significant political alliance with Bohemond of Taranto, who had become the ruler of the newly conquered Principality of Antioch following the capture of the city on May 3, 1098. In recognition of their assistance during the conquest, Bohemond granted the Genoese a series of privileges. He gave them 30 houses in Antioch, a headquarters, and the church of San Giovanni, which would serve as a lasting symbol of their influence in the region. In return for their military support during the First Crusade, Genoa was further rewarded with the relics of St. John the Baptist, which were brought back to the city on May 6, 1098, by a portion of the Genoese army. The acquisition of these holy relics enhanced Genoa's prestige and helped cement its status as a leading republic. Also, Genoa benefited from favorable commercial treaties and established numerous settlements across the Middle East. In the early 12th century, Genoa solidified its position through strategic alliances, most notably with King Baldwin I of Jerusalem, who reigned from 1100 to 1118. This alliance brought significant rewards to the Republic of Genoa. In exchange for its military support, Baldwin granted Genoa a substantial portion of the territories in the Holy Land. They received a third of the city of Caesarea, a third of the lordship of Arsuf, and a third of the revenue from the crucial port city of Acre. Additionally, a unique arrangement was made in which the Republic of Genoa would receive 300 bezants annually whenever 50 or more Genoese soldiers participated in Baldwin's campaigns, essentially ensuring Genoa a share of Baldwin's conquests. Not a bad deal. Not bad at all. A little bit more territory, a little bit of money. Certainly not one to pass up. So the growing political and military presence also led to a series of advantageous commercial agreements. The Republic's strong position as a maritime power facilitated trade with a diverse range of regions. Now, that includes the Byzantine Empire, Tripoli, which is in modern-day Libya, the Principality of Antioch, Cilician Armenia, and Egypt. These agreements resulted in significant increases in Genoese trade, particularly in luxury goods, and enhanced the Republic's economic prosperity. However, despite these successes, Genoa's position was challenged during the late 12th century, when Saladin's campaigns in Egypt and Syria caused Genoa to lose some of its territories. Although it retained the right to trade within these regions, the shifting balance of power in the eastern Mediterranean was another reminder of the volatile nature of territorial control during this period. Yet, through all the chaos, Genoa's influence in trade continued to thrive. Their involvement in military campaigns was also pivotal to their rise. In 1147, the Republic participated in the siege of Almeria, alongside Castile and Alfonso VII of Leon. The goal was to reclaim the city from Muslim control, a mission that they ultimately succeeded in. In recognition of its contributions, one of Genoa's own citizens, Otto de Bonvillano, was granted a third of the city after its capture. He swore an oath of loyalty to Genoa and pledged to maintain a garrison of 300 men to protect the city at all times. This development is a reflection of Genoa's evolving approach to expansion. You see, instead of relying solely on Republican government, Genoa's early military ventures often involved private citizens gaining control of foreign lands and then swearing allegiance to the Republic. That's one way to do it, not the traditional method. Well, it's indirect, sure, but it allowed Genoa to extend its influence without the need for a fully centralized or direct form of governance. In 1148, Genoa once again demonstrated its military prowess during the siege of Tortosa, assisting Count Raymond Berengar IV of Barcelona in capturing the city from Muslim forces. For its role in the conquest, Genoa was once again awarded a third of the city, more territorial holdings, and a better reputation to go with it. Well, all the while, as the influence of Genoa was expanding, its former rivals, Pisa and Amalfi, well, they were beginning to lose ground. Genoa was taking up a lot of space, and it was now emerging as the leading naval power. This period of the 11th and 12th centuries saw Genoa and Venice becoming the two principal maritime powers in the region. Both republics were heavily involved in the Mediterranean slave trade too, which became a lucrative business for them. Genoa's dominance in this trade solidified more of its commercial gains, but it also brought it into direct competition with Venice. The rivalry between the two cities in the Mediterranean was not limited to trade, but extended to military and naval conflicts as well, with both republics vying for control of key ports and trade routes. Thus, Venice emerged as Genoa's primary adversary, and the two republics became major participants in the Mediterranean slave trade all through the Middle Ages. Of course, a trade that was not only profitable, in our modern terms, questionable, but really the driving force that shaped both of the economies. Among the many treasures brought back to Genoa from the Crusades, one item stood above the rest. A green glass goblet that was long revered by the people of the Republic. For centuries, this object was considered to be the Holy Grail itself, a sacred relic that symbolized Genoa's deep connection to the Crusades and its role in the reconquest of the Holy Land. Of course, some believed that this had mystical powers and it was highly cherished by the Genoese, and its return to the city was celebrated as a profound religious and cultural victory. It was a symbol of Genoa's participation in the Crusades and its success. Whether it was the real Holy Grail or not, well, that is up to your imagination. However, alongside such revered artifacts, medieval Genoa also became famous for its involvement in those less noble activities that I had mentioned: slavery, this trade in human life. Of course, it was an integral part of the commercial network, but it's not just for Genoa. Pretty much everybody was doing this, and the extent to which they were doing it was essentially tied to their ability to do so. And it wasn't just the European side. The Muslims were doing it. Think of the Barbary pirates. Think about where we get the word Slav for those Slavic peoples. Don't think that this is purely a European phenomenon. It is most certainly not. Either way, all those ships back and forth, every day, every night, with all those poor souls often sold to work in households, or on ships, or in the fields, their exploitation, a pretty significant source of wealth. It is a darker aspect of Genoa's history. There was often complex and contradictory forms in which republics rise to power. Well, of course, they celebrated religious relics like the Holy Grail and saw themselves as this key force in the defense of Christendom, while at the same time these activities went on. It's just the way it is. Well, moving on, throughout the 13th century, Genoa and Venice engaged in fierce commercial rivalry. It kept going and going. The two maritime republics were both equally powerful and equally ambitious. Venice, having risen as a dominant naval and trading power, was always seeking to expand its commercial empire further eastward, and in doing so, it actually found itself in direct conflict with its former patron, the Byzantine Empire. I think you know what's coming. This all reached a pivotal moment in the Fourth Crusade, during which the Republic of Venice would play quite the role of a main character. You see, rather than supporting the Crusaders in their original mission to reclaim Jerusalem, the Venetians redirected the energies of the crusading armies towards the destruction of Constantinople, a former ally, a current rival, a Christian city. The Fourth Crusade was an incredible mess, a veritable dumpster fire, an embarrassment. This shift in focus culminated in the sack of Constantinople in 1204. Not good for Constantinople, but great news for Venice. They managed to secure crucial trading rights and carve out a powerful presence in the eastern Mediterranean. Exactly what they wanted. With the establishment of the Latin Empire, Venice's commercial interests were firmly entrenched in the region, ensuring that it would dominate much of the eastern Mediterranean's trade for years to come. Venetian merchants gained access to ports and routes that had once been solely under Byzantine control, making Venice the undisputed leader in Mediterranean commerce during the early 13th century. Yes, not very popular, Venice. At least not in my opinion. Not happy with them. Anyway, in contrast, Genoa, though certainly a formidable power in its own right, found itself in quite a precarious position. Seeking to regain its footing and restore its influence in the region, Genoa forged an alliance with Michael VIII Palaiologos, the Emperor of Nicaea. Michael, who had taken refuge in Nicaea following the fall of Constantinople, harbored ambitions of retaking the Byzantine capital and re-establishing the Byzantine Empire to its former glory. Understanding that regaining control of Constantinople would restore Nicaea's dominant position in Mediterranean trade, Michael sought the assistance of Genoa. In March 1261, the treaty between Genoa and Michael was signed in the city of Nymphaeum, marking the beginning of a new phase in Genoese influence in the region. Shortly after, on July 25th, 1261, the Nicaean army, under the command of Alexios Strategopoulos, successfully retook Constantinople. Mission accomplished. The restoration of the Byzantine Empire under Michael VIII not only marked a significant political victory, but also tilted the balance of power in the Mediterranean, and the balance was now tilted in favor of Genoa. With the empire's recovery, Genoa was granted free trade rights within the newly re-established Nicene Empire, giving Genoese merchants unprecedented access to those vital trade routes. In addition to the rights to trade freely within the empire, Genoa was granted control of key ports and way stations throughout the Aegean Sea. This included important commercial centers like the city of Smyrna, which is the modern-day Izmir, as well as islands such as Chios and Lesbos, which became integral to Genoa's growing commercial network. These strategic locations allowed Genoa to dominate trade in the eastern Mediterranean, facilitating movement of goods, particularly silk and spices, between Europe and Asia. The only nations with the ability to trade in the Black Sea were Genoa and Pisa. The Genoese colony of Caffa was founded in Crimea, which the Republic occupied in the same century. Genoa's wealth and power increased as a result of this alliance with the restored Byzantine Empire, but Venetian and Pisan trade also declined. Genoa had been granted most of the free trade rights by the Byzantines. Following the judge Sinucello's rebellion against Genoa, Pisa attempted to seize control of Corsica's administration and commerce in 1282. A portion of the Genoese fleet blockaded Pisan commerce near the Arno River in August of the same year. Both Pisa and Genoa prepared for all-out war in 1283. Of the 120 galleys that Genoa constructed, 60 were owned by the Republic, and the remaining 60 were rented to private citizens. Over 1,500 mercenaries were employed as soldiers and rowers. In 1283, the Pisan fleet stayed out of battle and attempted to exhaust the Genoese. In the Battle of Meloria on August 5, 1284, the 72-ship Pisan fleet, commanded by Albertino Morosini and Ugolino della Gardesca, was routed by the 93-ship Genoese fleet, led by Oberto Doria and Benedetto Zaccaria. 30 Pisan ships were taken to Genoa. 7 were sunk, and about 8,000 Pisans lost their lives in the conflict, accounting for over half of the 14,000 Pisan soldiers involved. Genoa gained control of Corsica's trade as a result of the defeat of Pisa, which never fully recovered, actually, as a maritime rival. Well, once a Pisan-controlled Sardinian town, Sassari became a commune or self-proclaimed free municipality under Genoa's authority. However, the Aragonese kings of Naples contested control and did not establish it until the 15th century, so Genoa did not acquire permanent control of Sardinia. In pursuit of the gold that made its way up through Sahara, Genoese traders pushed southward to the island of Sicily and into Muslim North Africa, setting up trade posts and Atlantic depots as far away as Sale and Safi. The people of the Kingdom of Sicily rose up in rebellion against Angevin rule in 1283. The uprising was dubbed Sicilian Vespers. Consequently, the kingdom came under Aragonese rule. The Kingdom of Sicily allowed Genoa, which had backed the Aragonese, free trade and export privileges. Bankers in Genoa also made quite a lot of money by lending to Sicily's new aristocracy, and in 1347 Corsica was formally annexed. Now we get to the point where Genoa somewhat begins to decline. You see, it declined as a result of the European economic downturn in the latter part of the 14th century, and of course its protracted conflict with Venice, which ended in its defeat at Chioggia in 1380. Due to the decisive battle that saw Genoa defeated by Venice, this crucial conflict with Venice has been known as the War of Chioggia. The Genoese possessed a naval superiority that gave them authority and a dominant position in northern Italy before the war, which raged from 1379 to 81. This naval superiority was taken away from Genoa after the defeat, which also forced the city-state to leave the eastern Mediterranean markets and marked the beginning of its proper downfall. Additionally, the Black Sea trade was diminished by Genoese emporia in the Aegean, and was also impacted by the growing Ottoman power. The Doge of Genoa, Antoniotto Adorno, appointed Charles VI of France for the Defensor des Communes, the defender of the municipality, of Genoa in 1396 to shield the Republic from internal strife and the provocations of the Duke of Orleans and the former Duke of Milan. This was the first time a foreign power had actually taken control of Genoa, even though the Republic had previously been partially ruled by a foreign entity, but, this time it was a little bit more proper in the sense of the term, ruled. Genoa in the 15th century, it appears to be quite turbulent, despite the fact that it's not well studied. The city had a long history of dealing in Levantine goods, and its financial know-how was well known throughout Europe. Following a brief period of French dominance from 1394 to 1409, the Visconti of Milan took control of Genoa. Genoa lost its colonies in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Asia Minor to the Ottomans. They lost Sardinia to Aragon. They lost Corsica to an internal uprising. Suppose they lost Corsica to themselves. What a shame. But two of the world's first banks were actually established in Genoa in the 15th century. The Banca Carige, which was established in 1483 as a mount of piety and operating until 2022, and the Bank of St. George, established in 1407, and the oldest state deposit bank when it closed in 1805. Under threat from Alfonso V of Aragon, the Doge of Genoa ceded the Republic to the French in 1458, transforming it into the Duchy of Genoa, which was ruled by a French royal governor named John of Anjou. But in 1461, Genoa rose up in rebellion, and Milan actually came to help them. They won. The Republic was reinstated, back to the good old days. Right? Not quite. After switching sides, the Milanese took control of Genoa in 1464 and made it a French crown fief. Didn't last for very long, didn't it? So from 1463 to 78, and from 1488 to 1499, the Milanese House of Forza ruled Genoa. Under almost constant French rule, the Republic reached its lowest point between 1499 and 1528. On May 30th, 1522, the city was taken by the Spanish and pillaged by their intramural allies, the old nobility who were encamped in the mountain fastness behind Genoa. A new opportunity arose when the Admiral Andrea Doria and the wealthy Doria family joined forces with Emperor Charles V to drive out the French and re-establish Genoa's independence in 1528. At this time, Genoese banks made their first loan to Charles. Numerous aristocratic Genoese families, including the Balbi, Doria, Grimaldi, Pallavicini, and Serra, accumulated enormous fortunes during the subsequent economic recovery. Felipe Fernandez Armesto and others claim that Genoa's Mediterranean-derived customs, like chattel slavery, were essential to the exploitation and exploration of the New World. So, with Genoese bankers in particular funding many of the Spanish crown's overseas ventures, from their counting houses in Seville, Genoa experienced a sort of renaissance, kind of as a junior associate and understudy of the Spanish Empire. well, the years 1557 to 1627, were referred to as the Age of the Genoese, because of a rule that was so subtle and advanced that historians were blind to it for quite a long time. Modern observers, however, can't help but notice the glaring wealth that was concentrated in the hands of a close-knit group of banker financiers. True venture capitalists, rather than being Genoese, as they passed the magnificent Mannerist and Baroque palazzo facades along Genoa's Strada Nova or Via Balbi. However, Genoa's trade was still heavily reliant on control of the Mediterranean sea lanes, so the Ottoman Empire's capture of Chios in 1566 was a serious setback. Now, Philip II staged bankruptcy in 1557, which drew the German banking houses into disarray, put an end to the Fugger's rule in Spanish financiers, providing the Genoese banking consortium with an opening. The Genoese bankers supplied a steady stream of income and flexible credit to the cumbersome Habsburg system. In exchange, well, the less reliable silver shipments coming from the Americas were quickly moved from Seville to Genoa in order to raise money for additional projects. The Genoese took control of the Spanish port of Panama, the first port established in the Pacific as a result of the conquest of the Americas around 1520. Until the original city was sacked and destroyed in 1671, the Genoese were granted a concession to use the port primarily for the slave trade of the New World on the Pacific. Don Sebastian Hurtado de Corzuera, the governor of Panama at the time, had enlisted Genoese, Peruvians, and Panamanians as soldiers in 1635 to fight Muslims in the Philippines and establish the city of Zamboanga after the sultanates of Sulu were overthrown. As a result, Genoese bankers were active in Spain's New World and Mediterranean territories, including the Philippines, Mexico, and Peru. For example, in the early 17th century, the Genoese banker Ambrogio Spinola, Marquess of Lo Balbase, organized and commanded an army that participated in the 80 Years' War in the Netherlands. Many of Genoa's merchant houses were destroyed by the frequent bankruptcies of the Spanish crown, which contributed to the city's renewed decline in the 17th century along with Spain's. A French fleet also severely bombarded the city in 1684 as retaliation for their alliance with Spain. That ought to show 'em. Nothing sends a message like a bombing. A French Savoyan army briefly besieged Genoa in May of 1625. The French would later bombard the city in May of 1684 for its support of Spain during the War of the Reunions, although it was eventually lifted with the help of the Spanish. Between 1656 and 57, a plague in Genoa killed up to half of its population. The island fortress of Tabarca, Genoa's final Mediterranean colony, was lost to the Bay of Tunis in 1742, and the city continued its gradual decline well into the 18th century. So, in 1729, the Republic had to deal with another uprising in Corsica amid a persistent decline in its power and economy. Given that the Church's representatives, working in perfect harmony with the Roman Curia, justified the war, it is regarded as the first and possibly most significant instance of a genuine break between the island and the Genoese Republic. This time, the Genoese government asked Charles VI for assistance. After Genoa paid 60,000 florins and 100 scudi for each soldier killed, he sent 10,000 German infantry from the imperial army to join the Republic's troops under Camillo Doria. The uprising was put down by Genoa, but this was short-lived. The Genoese again appealed to the emperor in 1733 after another uprising, but this time the imperial army refused to step in because it was so heavily engaged in the ongoing Polish War of Succession with the French, a little bit busy we'll get back to you later. The Republic had successfully demilitarized itself with only 2,000 soldiers spread across Liguria's fortifications, for a population of roughly 500,000 on the mainland, and law and order on Corsica was in complete chaos. In fact, a little bit of a statistic for you. There was nearly 900 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants per year between 1701 and 1733. It must be like living in London or something. Genoa's control over the island had been loose even prior to the uprisings. The Genoese government made an unsuccessful attempt to outlaw private gun ownership on Corsica. I'm sure you can imagine how that went from my cold, dead hands. Until the island, of course, was sold to France in 1768, there was constant guerrilla warfare. Not a good place to be. It sounds like a very picturesque place, but yeah, they don't tell you about the guerrilla warfare. They conveniently leave that part out. Of course, there was some unrest in the Republic following the Convention of Turin in 1742, where Austria had formed an alliance with the Kingdom of Sardinia. However, the Genoese Republic abandoned its neutrality and sided with the House of Bourbon in the War of Austrian Succession out of fear of diplomatic isolation after the Treaty of Worms, which was signed in 1743, gave this temporary relationship a more stable and long-lasting character. As a result, the Republic of Genoa and its Bourbon allies, the Kingdom of France, the Spanish Empire, and the Kingdom of Naples, signed an agreement, albeit a covert one. The Republic of Genoa declared war on the Kingdom of Sardinia on June 26, 1745. Genoa would, of course, suffer greatly as a result from this choice. It eventually submitted to the Austrians in September of 1746 and was briefly taken over, before a revolt 2 months later freed the city. Following the return, in 1747, the Austrians besieged Genoa with a Sardinian contingent before being expelled by a Franco-Spanish army. In the Peace of Aix-la-Chapelle, Genoa was able to keep its lands, but it was unable to hold on to Corsica in its weaker form. In 1755, the Corsican Republic was established after the Genoese were expelled. In the 1768 Treaty of Versailles, Genoa was compelled to give up Corsica to the French, ultimately depending on the French intervention to put an end to this uprising. Thanks to Genoese propagandists and refugees seeking refuge in the neighboring state of the Alps, revolutionary echoes from France reached Genoa in 1794 and 95. In 1794, a plot against the aristocratic and oligarchic ruling class emerged. But in May of 1797, the French and Genoese Jacobins intended to topple the Doge Giacomo Maria Brignole's government and began to take shape, sparking a street fight between the supporters and opponents of the existing customs system. When the old elites had ruled the state for its entire history were overthrown in early June, Napoleon, during his campaigns of 1796, and his emissaries' direct intervention in Genoa, was the lasting action that really resulted in the fall of the Republic. The Ligurian Republic was established on June 14th, 1797, under the watchful eye of Napoleonic France. A more conservative constitution was adopted following Napoleon's takeover of France, but the Ligurian Republic's existence was brief as it was annexed by France in 1805, becoming the departments of Apennines, Gênes, and Montenotte. After Napoleon was overthrown and the Congress of Vienna was held, Genoa briefly regained its independence under the name Repubblica Genovese, but it only lasted a year. However, in violation of the principle of restoring legitimate governments and monarchies to the old republic, the Congress established the annexation of the territories, and thus the entire Liguria, along with the Oltregiogo area and the island of Capraia to the kingdom of Sardinia, which is governed now by the House of Savoy. Well, of course, I suppose we can go a little bit further than that, but really the story somewhat ends at Napoleon. Of course, Genoa's still there. Why don't you go take a look? What's the worst that will happen? Don't be scared. I'm going to thank my top-tier patrons and supporters. Bit of a grim note to end that on, sorry. Alright, so my top-tier patrons and supporters, here's the list. Okay, I'm going to read them out. Dark, Kimberly, Christine, Sally, Ember, Susan, Cameron, Legitmus, Carrie, Charlene, Lynn, Therese, Katiana, Nicholas, Ulfednir, Alexander, Charles, Christine, Dr. Neuro Nerd, Erin, Jaden, Jim, Jeffrey, Jessica, Madeline, Melissa, Orthodox Review, Scott, Stark Factory, Shell, Wendy, Josie, Sarah, Video Man, and Ryan. Thank you very much. Did you enjoy that? A little exploration into Genoa. All the way from before Roman times, all the way up to Napoleon. What a story. I think that perhaps the rest of Genoa's story is yet to be written. Who knows? Perhaps the Republic will rise again. But we may not live to see it. Good night, everyone. As always, lots of love to you all.